Hello and welcome to my shop. My name is George and I'm coming to you from Chelsea, Quebec. Now I just published two videos on a self-centering router-mortiser. The first one about the mortiser itself, which I think is still worth watching. The second one was about some 3D printed stop blocks that in the end I decided were overkill. The comment made by Apple Hash was a suggestion that maybe I could use T-Track instead. And that opened my eyes to just how silly the whole 3D printed stop blocks were. I think I must have had a bout of tool dementia where you just go nuts because you have a tool that does something and so you make everything with that tool. So I now think that second video, the one that was about stop blocks, details, is not worth watching. In this video, I'm going to give you two alternatives to those stop blocks. The first is, thank you Apple Hash, about using a T-Track. And the second one picks up on that comment I made at the very end of the second video, which is that, hey, maybe you could make some wedges out of popsicle sticks. So both of those solutions I think are better, faster and cheaper than the 3D printed stop blocks. So that's what's the topic for this video. Now I want to thank Apple Hash for his suggestion that an alternative to using the plastic blocks would be to use some T-Track instead. So imagine laying in some T-Track into one of the wider cleats. And let's say this is the router. I'll just use a base as an example. Bring the router up to its farthest position forward. Move the stop block to where you want it. Cinch it into place. Bring the router back to the farthest position back. Move the other stop block. You see how much faster this is to set up the first one, and then of course you've got these things in place for all the rest of the mortisers. So thank you Apple Hash for sending that in as a comment. I think this is a great suggestion. So here's yet another alternative to using the little plastic blocks. It's the suggestion that I made about slipping in some popsicle sticks at the end of the block video. So I found this material. It's not as thick as the groove, so it fits in loosely. And what I'll do is I'll just plane off a little bit off the ends to turn this into wedges, and then use wedges as the stops. Okay, I'm going to remove the plastic blocks. So now with the router in place, I'm going to try my little wedges. And off camera I tapped in one at this end as well. And now let me just see how they bump. They don't seem to be moving. I think this is going to work. So if you didn't watch the second video, that's the one on making the stop blocks, details. I'm going to say don't bother with it. But if you didn't watch it, you might be wondering what these are. So this is another pair of cleats, solid wood, milled down to 1/2 inch thick. And one of them has a couple of modifications. So a hole bored on the interior and then tapped, and it accepts by, with a machine screw, a stop block. So that stop block is used on the interior to hold the workpiece at a set position. The other thing that you need here is a groove that runs along the top. Now, for an earlier way of doing things, I had bored holes and tapped them at positions. Ignore those. You don't need them. All you need is the groove. The groove measures approximately 1/8 of an inch by 1/8 of an inch. So about 3 millimeters by 3 millimeters. And it runs more or less down the center of the top. The way you make it is by estimating where your table saw blade is going to hit the center, setting this up against the fence, and then just running it over with the table saw set to a very, very low height. So 1/8 of an inch, maybe 3/16, but shallow. And if it ends up being not wide enough, you can turn the board around and run it a second time. That should make it a little bit wider. If you have to bump the fence, fine, go ahead. In the end, what you want is a groove that is a little bit wider than the material that you're going to use to make the wedges, and not quite as deep as the width of that material. Okay, well, thank you for sticking it through till here, and thank you to Apple Hash for setting me straight on just how silly the stop blocks were. If you sat through that second video, I hope you'll forgive me for wasting your time. Now, on time, make some for your passion, and if you can, share it.